is an indication of the importance and relevance of Nairobi as a UN global hub. The United Nations office in Nairobi, as the only UN headquarters office in the Global South, has seen an increasing number of UN offices seeking to relocate their staff to Nairobi with the objective of working together to the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is for UN Habitats, UNEP, and the growing confluence of UN entities operating in and from Nairobi that the Secretary General has proposed and the General Assembly has approved an unprecedented program of investment in our complex, including a substantial and long overdue expansion and upgrade of this conference facility. Lastly, I would like to thank member states for the great support they provide to UN Habitats, UNEP, UNON, and all the UN agencies, funds and programs working in Kenya. As UNON, we are particularly grateful for member states' support to our capital investments, which will ensure the provision of upgraded facilities in our Gigiri complex and transform us into an iconic premises in Africa. We thank you, President Ruto, for your tremendous support for this capital project. As we move forward with this project, we are conscious of our responsibility to do so in close partnership with UN Habitat and UNEP, both being key stakeholders for the conference upgrade projects. For its part, UN Habitat will help us to ensure that we are working in alignment with the principles of sustainable urbanization. Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a successful deliberation, exchange and networking session in this assembly, and we look forward to the important resolution and outcome of the meetings. Thank you.
I thank you, Madame Bangura, for this very informative statement, and on behalf of the UN Habitat Assembly, I wish to thank you for your warm welcome on this beautiful compound. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now call on Mr. Lee Yunhua, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Department of Economic Affairs, to share some brief remarks and to introduce, throughout a video recording, the statement of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres. I invite the Secretariat to screen the video statements from the Secretary General at the appropriate time during Mr. Yunhua's presence at the podium. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, President of the Habitat Assembly, distinguished delegate. May I have the honor to invite you to watch the video addressed by the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres. Please.
Excellencies, friends, cities are central to the human story. Through much of our history, they have driven progress. The decisions taken in them have determined our path. Ideas and innovations that originated in cities have shaped our world. And today their role is more important than ever, because the UN Habitat Assembly meets amidst a world in crisis. Inequalities are increasing, global temperatures are rising with catastrophic effects. Debt is straining developing countries' economies to the limit. And halfway to the deadline for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we are leaving more than half the world behind. COVID-19 has hobbled progress in poverty reduction. An estimated 670 million still live in extreme poverty, and over 1 billion people still live in slums, driven to cities not due to jobs and opportunities as in the past, but lack of services elsewhere. There is still time to reverse these trends, but to do so, we must fight for the future we want, the future envisaged in the SDGs, the new urban agenda and the Paris Agreement. Cities are critical battlegrounds. They generate 70% of global emissions, they house half of humanity, and by 2050, over 2 billion more people will call them home. My report, Our Common Agenda, calls for a reinvigorated and more inclusive multilateralism recognizing the pivotal role cities and other local authorities play in addressing the challenges we face. Such multilateralism is vital to help cities to play their part, to ensure the finance, information and support is in place for them to become resilient, inclusive and sustainable. Multilateralism must support cities to take action on climate, advance access to affordable housing and deliver the local initiatives needed to make the SDGs a reality. I'm confident that this UN Habitat Assembly will advance these aims, including through your ministerial declaration. Together, we can achieve the sustainable urban future we need to build a peaceful, prosperous and healthy world for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Botswana, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to represent the Secretary General and to address you today at the second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. Cities have played a foundational role in shaping our societies. They have often served as a symbol of development success. Therefore, your focus today on driving forward a sustainable urban future through inclusive and effective multilateralism is relevant and well-timed, Excellencies. In the coming September, world leaders will gather at the SDG Summit to be held in New York to mark the halfway point on our journey towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But all reviews of the progress today have found us lacking behind. Despite our promise to leave no one behind, some 670 million people live in extreme poverty. Almost 1/4 of the young people are without school, training, or employment. And the safe access to the water and the sanitation services still affects billions. That is why the UN Secretary General has called on the world leaders to deliver a rescue plan for people and the planet, to generate fresh ambitions and transformative actions at the national and the global levels for the breakthroughs that we need. This plan that aims at a greater support for the developing countries to implement the SDGs, including by filling the financing gap through the delivery of the SDGs stimulus. Distinguished delegates, in this battle for sustainability, cities played a decisive role, but the world is far from achieving the goal of sustainable cities. Nearly 1.1 billion people are living in the urban slums. Just about half of the world's urban population has convenient access to the public transport. About 55% of the municipal solid waste is managed in the controlled facilities. Also worrying is the sparsity of the data to monitor the SDG 11, limiting our ability to get the full picture and make the effective decisions. Only around half of the UN member states have internationally comparable data for that goal. Yet, the independent group of scientists in its quadrennial Global Sustainable Development Report highlighted urban and peri-urban development as one of the 6 key entry points to accelerate the progress towards the SDGs. The report calls for the policy actions that are well aligned with the focus areas of this assembly. Such actions would advance the climate mitigation, improve the public health, and tackle the pollutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the assembly in Nairobi this week will also enrich the high-level political forum on sustainable development to be held in New York in coming July, while the SDG 11 on sustainable city and the human settlement will be under review. Rapid urbanization is a reality of our time. We must ensure that this trend results in the better standards of the living for all the peoples in a healthy planet. Let us join to ensure that sustainable urban development remains high on the multilateral agenda and embedded in our development endeavors around the world. I wish you a great success in this assembly. Thank you.
On behalf of all delegations, I would like to thank the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, for his inspiring message at the UN Habitat Assembly, and Mr. Yunois for his message. Please convey our sincere appreciation to the Secretary General. I understand we have a short message from the President of the United Nations General Assembly. Secretary, if we have it, please screen it now.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me extend my warmest greetings to all the participants of the second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly in Nairobi. Currently, the United Nations is leading some crucial global undertakings. Understanding the root causes of the most complex crises of the last 75 years. Implementing an ambitious sustainability development agenda and protecting the planet from the scourge of climate change. UN Habitat plays a vital role in all these endeavors. Cities are in the epicenter of the converging crises we currently face. From migration to climate change and conflicts, the cumulative effects of these phenomena are magnified in urban areas, in particular in developing countries. So, how can we make our cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable? First, second, governments must monitor the spatial distribution of future populations to assess risk associated with climate change, such as flooding, heat waves, epidemics, food security, and freshwater availability. But what we urgently need is a mindset shift. From a business-as-usual planning and operation to one aiming at real sustainability transformation. This means strengthening the science policy interface, advancing evidence-based solutions, and approaching our goals holistically. In your discussions this week, I invite you to explore how we can ensure that our approach to sustainability transformation better reflects the role of cities in our world. Ladies and gentlemen, the lagging in SDG implementation is a universal problem. However, it is the people living in the developing countries, including those in special situations, who often bear the brunt of the crises we face. We urgently need political will, commitment, solidarity, financing, and action. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that we are capable of implementing massive, radical, and transformative action when humanity is under threat. We must build on this momentum and mobilize political commitments and breakthroughs. Ahead of the SDG Summit, I invite you to review the lessons learned from the national voluntary reviews, unlock new commitments, and adopt innovative policies based on scientific inputs. The SDG Summit in September will be an opportunity to commit to the implementation of bold and game-changing solutions, including in urban areas. Understanding the interdependence of the global goals is crucial to unlocking their full potential, optimizing resources, and achieving successful outcomes. I'm confident that this second session of the UN Habitat Assembly will yield fruitful outcomes. I eagerly await the results. Thank you.
Our gratitude to the President of the United Nations General Assembly for taking time to send us this message. Before I call their Excellencies Vice President Sowani and President Ruto, I wish to call on the Executive Director, Mrs. Muna Mon Sharif. Madam, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President of Habitat Assembly. Your Excellency, Honorable Dr. William Samuel Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellency, Mr. Slamba Songwane, Vice President of the Republic of Botswana. Honorable Ramon Meya Falcon, Secretary of Agrarian Ministry of Land and Urban Development, SIDATU of Mexico, and also the President of the United Nations Habitat Assembly. Mr. Lee Juanhua, Under Secretary General of the United Nations Departments of Economic and Social Affairs, representing the Secretary General of the United Nations. Madam Zainab Hawa Bangura, my sister, Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi. Heads of delegations, Your Excellencies, parliamentarian, ambassadors, permanent representatives, and members of the diplomatic corps, mayors and local government representatives, representatives of the UN Habitat Partners, the private sector, and civil society organizations, distinguished delegates, members of the press, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, karibuni sana Nairobi. Habari ya usubuhi. Welcome to the second United Nations Habitat Assembly. This morning, we mark the completion of a full cycle of our governance structure. Let me congratulate and thank Member States for this achievement and for your support to UN Habitat. My sister Zainab Hawa Bangura, the Director General of UNON, thank you for all the support and arrangement from your team. We look forward to working closely with you to highlight the improvements to this beautiful campus to enable us to convene member states in the future. At this second assembly, we are coming together at a time when the world is facing multiple and interrelated crises. In February 2020, the world was in lockdown because of COVID-19. The socio-economic fallout has intensified inequalities and fueled conflicts in every region of the world. All is happening when humanity is facing a triple planetary crisis involving climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. As the Secretary General said, unless we act now, the 2030 agenda will become an epitaph for the world that might have been. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is very appropriate that our second United Nations Habitat Assembly is starting on the World Environment Day. It is significant because the climate goals, the Paris Agreement, and our aspirations to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees can only be achieved if member states prioritize sustainable urbanization as the basis of sustainable development. We are grateful for the first time 50 ministers of housing and planning met in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to ensure that we mainstream and prioritize a just transition of our cities and communities for the sake of future generations. The reality is that impact of extreme climate events, conflicts, natural disasters, global pandemic, and the cost of living crisis are felt first and foremost in cities. Their secondary effects, often long-term in nature, and are also visited upon urban areas. Multi-dimensional inequalities continue to deepen between and within countries and territories, weakening the social contract that forms the foundations of our society. Your Excellency, President Ruto, I am very grateful for the continued support of Kenya for UN Habitat, especially we are celebrating 45 years in Nairobi, Kenya. Kenya, under your leadership, continues to be a beacon of hope. As you know firsthand, those of us from humble beginnings understand how adequate housing and urbanization can deliver a better quality of life. The more well-planned and well-organized, the more people we can uplift from poverty. Unfortunately, humanity's over-reliance on carbon and consumption is not only killing our planet, but also leaving some 3 billion people in inadequate housing. Even in the most advanced countries, an increasing number of citizens are homelessness. They are joined by 1.5 billion currently residing in poor and unhealthy housing. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the challenge before us is enormous. The only way we can achieve positive and transformative impact on the ground is not to go it alone, but to embrace multilateral action. Here, I would like to quote a Swahili proverb that reads, "Unity is strength, division is weakness." To answer the call of Member States to set priorities, we have taken guidance from Member States at the high-level meeting on the implementation of the new urban agenda last year. We are also grateful for inputs from ministerial roundtables at the 11th session of the World Urban Forum and at COP27 respectively. I have put forward UN Habitat's priorities, including on adequate housing, climate adaptation, localizing the Sustainable Development Goals, and better urban crisis management. They correspond to the UN Habitat Strategic Plan that was approved by Member States in the first assembly. We thank the Committee of Permanent Representatives that pronounced on the robustness of our strategic plan despite COVID-19. We appreciate the guidance from the Executive Board to extend the strategic plan by a further 2 years to align with the rest of the United Nations system. Before I conclude, I wish to acknowledge the considerable support and wise counsel we have received over many weeks and months from members of the Executive Board, the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and the Bureau of the UN Habitat Assembly. Let us flip the script on urbanization. We need practical and pragmatic ways to transform our cities into champions of zero waste. We need to formulate policies that guide countries towards carbon neutrality. We need to harness the talent in cities and communities to reshape financing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We need Member States to prioritize national and local cooperation as the basis of a just transition. Let us never forget human rights and the UN Charter as the basis for sustainable urbanization. President William Ruto and Vice President Song Wane, representing President Masisi, I thank you for your presence at the second United Nations Habitat Assembly. I thank you for championing sustainable urbanization, and I humbly submit the request from this plenary for you both to carry the torch for a better urban future for all on the global stage. I thank you. Asante sana.
Thank you, Madam, for the very wise words and the assurance that this organization is now back on its right track and can go nowhere but forward. We will now have a pleasure of listening to a very nice program of Art of Music Foundation, which is a musical group called Ghetto Classics, a very unique orchestra which uses music education to provide the youth with opportunities to better themselves and their community by giving them the life skills that come with the discipline of studying music. Your Excellencies, Vice President Rawani and President Ruto, I hope you don't mind the upcoming very short interlude to prepare us to hear your words. We will now hear from Ghetto Classics. Distinguished delegates, you will agree with me that this has been a very impressive statement by these wonderful children. Let's give them a round of applause again. Thank you, Ghetto Classics. Let me also thank the Ambassador of Belgium, Mr. Peter Madame, who sponsored this performance. Ambassador, thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my distinct honor and pleasure to invite His Excellency Vice President Zwane and Botswana, who is a strong supporter and friend of not only the UN Habitat, but of the United Nations, including in the Economic and Social Council, Landlocked Development Countries Group, and in the Kimberley process. Mr. Vice President, we will feel very honored that despite your busy schedule, and you could find time not just for UN Habitat, but for the United Nations as a whole. Thank you, and you have the floor.
And many here. First, let me recognize Your Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya. Let me recognize Honorable Romain Mayor Falcon, the Secretary, Agrarian, Territorial and Urban Development of Mexico, and President of the UN Habitat Assembly. Recognize honorable ministers here present. I also recognize Ms. Bagwara, Director General Union. Madam Mohaji Sharif, Executive Director of the United Nations Settlements Program, UN Habitat. Allow me also to recognize all of you, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, and ladies and gentlemen, safe to say, all protocol observed. Your Excellency, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, President of the Great Republic of Kenya, and Ms. Rachel Ruto, distinguished heads of state and governments here present, Excellencies, the Director General of the United Nations Office in Nairobi, Ms. Bangura, Executive Director of UN Habitat, Ms. Samona Mohod Sharif, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. Allow me on the onset to thank His Excellency Dr. William Ruto for inviting His Excellency the President of Botswana, Dr. Mokwetsi Masisi, whom I have the honor to represent here today. Sadly, our President's absence is due to the passing on of his dear mother, Ms. Precious Maseo Masisi, on Saturday night, June the 3rd, 2023. As the nation mourns her death, we pray for Almighty God's comfort to the family, relatives, and friends. The theme for this assembly is, as we are all aware, a sustainable urban future through inclusive and effective multilateralism, achieving the sustainable development goals in times of global crisis. End of quote. It comes at a crucial time. It comes at a crucial time when the world is grappling with environmental crisis, at the same time recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in cities and human settlements where people are highly concentrated. The theme is apt as it underscores the need to develop global solidarity to address global challenges, including the rapid trend of urbanization. This new form of solidarity will overcome challenges we are all facing due to increasing vulnerability of people's livelihoods from rural to urban areas, triggered by such issues such as climate change, conflict, and financial crisis. It cannot be business as usual. We need to inspire the coming generation and make sure that prosperity is based on values of social cohesion and humanity, while leaving no one behind. Our efforts require complementary solutions and concerted efforts from all, including continental and regional bodies, governments, policymakers, civil society organizations, religious leaders, and communities. That is how we build and strengthen resilience. The African continent, which has the highest urbanization rate in the world, is expected to reach the urban transition by 2030, with half of the population living in urban areas. We can change that. Urban transition offers great opportunities which this assembly must address. In most of our countries, rapid urbanization gives rise to housing deficit, growth of informal settlements, inadequate urban basic infrastructures such as energy, health facilities, transport, water, and sanitation services. These are worsened by lack of capacity for proper planning, governance, as well as financial constraints. All these problems indicate policy and implementation failures and contradict our principles and commitments to the new urban agenda. Excellencies, Madam Executive Director, for Africa, if urbanization does not come with digital economic transformation, mindset change, and the industrialization dynamic as expected, it will be a missed opportunity. There must be a linkage between sustainable urbanization and job creation, livelihood opportunities, and improved quality of life. Urbanization without adequate productive jobs will jeopardize not only our development efforts, but also peace and security. Many governments are still contending with managing the rising expectations of citizens that stem from rapid urbanization and delayed socioeconomic transformation. The unmet expectations of the people have contributed to growing frustration to the elderly people with disabilities, and particularly the youth, who demand a better tomorrow. Let us learn from the mistakes that others did and change the paradigm in Africa. Let us strive to reverse the trend with well-managed and planned urbanization that ensures sustainable development, good governance, dictates that our technocrats in the relevant disciplines and professions must up their acts to deliver on the promises that we made to our people. Botswana is ready with other member states to demonstrate the relevance of urbanization as a mega trend and to compare notes on policies and programs towards transforming our states, to raise awareness and advance the concept of resilience and sustainable cities. The planning and development of resilient cities and human settlements has become a priority and should be based on solid partnerships, among institutions, including the private sector, in and outside the Southern African region. The expert leadership of the United Nations is pivotal to the strategic thrust and action. I also urged that as African countries, we commit to elevate the African urban agenda at the level of the African Union. Together, we can leverage urbanization as an engine for economic transformation. In this respect, I would like to seize this opportunity to urge the UN Habitat to adhere to the United Nations General Assembly mandate and strengthen the regional and sub-regional cooperation with other international organizations to amplify the implementation of the new urban agenda, especially in Africa. Regional economic communities and specialized regional entities can be the anchor of regional solutions and collaborations to promote sustainable urbanization building on the new framework of the African Continental Free Trade Area that requires viable cities and to be effective. Excellencies, before I conclude, I wish to commend Ms. Mamouna Mohadi Sharif, the Executive Director of the UN Habitat, for her sterling leadership. She has tirelessly spearheaded key initiatives amid positioning the organization as a leader in sustainable urbanization. You can continue, Madam Executive Director, to count on Botswana's support to fulfill this important mandate. Finally, I sincerely hope that this second session of the United Nations Habitat Assembly will renew our commitment to implementing the new urban agenda with renewed vigor, determination, and visibility at the national levels. I thank you. Asante sana.
Our condolences to the family of President Masisi and Mrs. Masisi, please. Mr. Vice President, I am grateful for your thoughtful, provoking address and for your country's unwavering commitment for social, economic development and finding enduring solutions to poverty. I thank you. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor and pleasure to invite our host and president of the beautiful country, His Excellency President Ruto, a leader who has been a supporter of UN Habitat, to inaugurate this second session of the UN Habitat Assembly. Mr. President, we are truly grateful for your magnificent attention and you have paid to UN Habitat. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's take our seats. Your Excellency Slambas Sokwane, the Vice President of the Republic of Botswana, representing President Masisi. Your Excellency Roman Mayor Falcon, the President of the UN Habitat Assembly. Director General of the United Nations Office at Nairobi, Zainab Hawa Bangura. Executive Director of the UN Habitat, Maimouna Sharif, my sister. Honorable Ministers and heads of delegations, mayors and representatives of local and regional governments, delegates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Nairobi.
On behalf of the people and government of Kenya and on my own behalf, I'm truly delighted to have the honor to welcoming you to this warm and beautiful land in Kenya and to our capital city of Nairobi, the globally famous green city in the sun. I hope you have already experienced our people's legendary hospitality and that you will find some time to explore and enjoy the attractions which have earned us the name Magical Kenya. Maybe at this point it is important for me to tell you maybe 3 things that are important for your stay in Nairobi. Number 1, this is the city, the only one in the world, with a closed canopy forest on one side, the side where we are. This is also the only city in the world that has a national park in the city with wild animals, elephants and rhinos and lions and cheetahs. And just for your information, you may find them in the street sometimes because they break off from the fence of the national park. Please be careful because they are wild. They are not domesticated. And lastly, many of you, at the end of Kenya is the home and the cradle of humankind. This is where the earliest remains of man have been traced. So when you find yourself feeling at home and having a problem going back to Europe and America and the rest of Africa, just know that you are at home. So let me welcome you home. In fact, we are considering removing all requirements of travel and visa because it's not fair for anybody to be asked for visa when they are going home. Our ambition to be the home of the United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, was inspired by a deep commitment to pursue economic development together with sustainable urbanization in harmony with the preservation of our national heritage. The international community's decision to locate this critical organization here is therefore out of recognition and emphatic endorsement of this commitment. Our experience in balancing the imperatives of industrialization, sustainable urbanization, and ecological responsibility as fundamental components of socio-economic transformation has had its challenges and setbacks. But we are persuaded now, more than ever, that not only is it worthwhile and feasible, but it also enhances the efficiency, safety, beauty, and livability of our cities. Even now, challenges exist with variety and on a scale that is unprecedented. The world is emerging from a devastating pandemic whilst grappling with a relentless economic crisis driven by geopolitical tensions as well as the triple planetary crisis of pollution, loss of biodiversity, and of course, climate change. As a consequence, millions of people throughout the world have been adversely affected, including through threats to life and also threats to livelihoods. In addition to normal migration to urban areas, millions of people displaced by the recent social, economic, and political upheavals joined the poor, vulnerable, underserved, and marginal segments of our urban populations. For better or for worse, the world population has reached 8 billion people, 57% of whom live in urban areas. These numbers are expected to increase steadily in the coming years, but urban populations are projected to rise even faster In the global south, the rates will be even more pronounced, whilst in Africa, where the median age is 19, urban populations will be very youthful, presenting a novel set of challenges and opportunities for national economic and urban planning and general development. Urban centers have always held the most intense concentrations of both best and the worst human possibilities: wealth and poverty, well-being and suffering, dignity and misery, all in one ecosystem. As a result, they are also the theaters of the starkest inequalities in human opportunities and human outcomes. The explosion in global populations as well as urbanization has immense implications for global production and consumption, with humanity poised firmly between trends and practices likely to overwhelm the planet's capacity to support life on one end and clean, green, efficient, and abundant sustainability on the other end. Fundamentally, this gathering is one more opportunity for the global community to confer and reflect about the progress made in imagining new possibilities for the sustainable provision of opportunities and amenities to promote the flourishing of nearly 10 billion human beings, whilst enhancing the Earth's capacity to support all life on it. Urbanization is an economy's ultimate test of efficiency, inclusivity, resilience, and sustainability across all goods and services. Huge demands for basic goods is always accompanied by tremendous pressure on energy resources and the environment. The connection between prosperity and ecological sustainability is always strong and direct. How we perform in this test depends on the type and quality of decisions, choices, strategies, and policies that we make and pursue, which in turn reflects the depth of our deliberations and attention to the agenda in forums like this one. Our progress in affirming the fundamental right to decent housing is critical to the achievement of sustainable urbanization in terms of SDG number 11. Recognizing this imperative and realizing that more than half of Kenya's population will live in urban areas by 2050, we have integrated universal housing as a critical pillar of the national bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Into the housing program, we have further mainstreamed sustainable urban practices of green building, green spaces, adoption of low-carbon energy use, including low-carbon transport solutions, as well as urban agriculture and effective waste management. The governor of Nairobi informed me this morning that he made sure that all the delegates were transported on buses that do not use fossil fuels. That all the buses that were used to transport delegates here were using green energy. In addition to these measures under our urban resilience program, we are restoring degraded landscapes and ecosystems through a robust program, which includes increasing Kenya's tree cover from 12% currently to 30% by planting 15 billion trees over the next 10 years. Our capacity to coherently pursue these vital objectives has been significantly bolstered by the government's policy to mainstream sustainable development goals generally, and more pertinently, number 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and number 13 on climate action into national development planning and implementation. A key barrier to our aspiration for sustainable urbanization happens to be the very impediment to efficient sustainable climate action in the global South and Africa, and that is sufficient and affordable financing. As a result, we are unable to effectively pursue all the opportunities in sustainable urbanization and leverage them to promote the broader agenda of economic transformation, climate action, and sustainable development. Our discussions must therefore pay due attention to the fact that the prevalent unjustness of the international financial architecture and the discriminatory practices inherent in development financing are iniquitous insofar as they directly and indirectly exacerbate the vulnerability of the majority of humanity. It is time, therefore, to correct this systemic injustice to enable us effectively mobilize multilateralism to achieve global net zero emissions, avert a climate catastrophe, and achieve sustainable development goals. Let us apply ourselves to these imperatives and ultimately make a stand and take a stand for humanity by way of embracing an effective, sustainable, inclusive, and just vision for the UN habitat. I acknowledge with profound gratitude the progress UN Habitat has made in refining and championing the deployment of effective multilateralism in addressing the challenges of human settlement and promoting sustainable urbanization. For this reason, I believe it is necessary to reiterate here the urgent need and immense importance of strengthening UN Habitat and enhancing its capacity to support member states in advancing the agenda of sustainable urbanization and human settlement. Clearly, we have an assignment, and your work is well defined. I urge you to exploit this important opportunity to generate a robust framework for addressing the existential crisis of our time. On that note, I would like to announce to you that Kenya is privileged to have the honor of co-hosting the inaugural Africa Climate Summit to be held from the 4th to the 6th of September this year here in Nairobi. The summit will be Africa's opportunity to refine its position in preparation for COP28, which I hope is going to be the last COP for us to host, where we expect to articulate our agenda in a strong, clear, united, and effective voice. I take this opportunity to welcome you back to Nairobi for the summit. And I hope we will all have the resolve of making COP28 the last COP that we are going to hold as humanity. I am told that there are preparations for COP29. I think they should be cancelled. Because it is possible for us to agree on a framework that will bring everybody on board. And as a continent, we will be going to COP28 with a clear mind on what we need to do and how Africa and the global South can work with the global North, not as adversaries, but as partners to be able to resolve the climate crisis and present ourselves the opportunity to have a win-win outcome that has no finger pointing. I am a very strong believer that with the right investments, Africa can present the opportunity to decarbonize global manufacturing and industrialization and provide for green growth. This is not an occasion for us to do the usual, North versus South. I think it will be irresponsible of us to continue that conversation. the South is as in danger as is the North on this matter of climate change. None of us is safe. And therefore, we should act in concert, we should act together, and we should seek a win-win outcome. The second session of the UN Habitat Assembly is now officially open, and I thank you.
Mr. President, words cannot express our sincere gratitude for the kindness and the profound words you have shared with us, and for finding time to inaugurate this second session of the UN Habitat Assembly. I thank you. Distinguished delegates, we have come to the end of the first part of our inaugural meeting.
And industrial parks, CAIPs. These counties participated out of their own volition. I must say, to begin with their own county resources, as part of the matching program, the sharing for sharing towards productivity and towards jobs. This is money belonging to county governments. In normal circumstances, we are used to national government and county governments haggling over resources. This is the first project where counties volunteered to donate resources and their money because they actually believe in this program. As we come to the end of the financial year and the passage of the finance and the appropriation bill and also the estimates, we are now going to move to the second phase where, to the best of the information I have from the Council of Governors, all the other 33 counties have indicated that they have already appropriated money in the budget so that they can also join this journey. So we are here today as part of furthering that cooperation to create jobs, to increase incomes, and to increase our national productivity. But one voice has been missing in that conversation. That is the private sector. That is why today we have brought here all our 3 leading business management organizations, the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So this tripartite arrangement is now taking shape. The national government on one side, the county government on the other side, and now the private sector who actually do the actual work. So why we're here today, Your Excellency, is to be able to understand each other and to give a chance for the private sector to catch up, because for the first time, government, both at national level and county level, is actually ahead of the private sector. But you cannot do this without the private sector. So we are here today to give the private sector a chance to catch up, to be part of this journey, so that together as a country, all regions of this country, all the counties, all the different persuasions and backgrounds coming together on something that is not disputed. So we're here today to focus on 7 value chains: the leather value chain, the textile and cotton value chain, the bilateral value chain, the automotive value chain, the housing value chain. All these value chains are what we have identified as part of the bottom-up economic transformation agenda as having the highest potential of lifting this country in terms of getting out of the lower middle income status to the upper middle income status. We can do it and we can create jobs. So let me take this opportunity to invite the private sector to make a presentation of how they see them working with the national government and working with the county government in this journey towards productivity, incomes, and jobs. And to present the private sector is none other but the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Madam Carol Kariuki. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Excellency. All protocols observed. We're going to start this conversation with a presentation, and that will be done by Anthony Mwangi from KM, who is the CEO of KM. And then after that, we'll have a panel where Your Excellency and Chair of the Governors Council will join in, and I'll join in. And then from there, we'll be able to call a few as we do that. So let me ask Anthony Mwangi to come and make the major presentation on those sectors, touching very briefly, and it'll only take 10 minutes, and then we'll move into the panel. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, the President, Excellencies Governors, CS Moses Kuria, other CSs present, all protocols observed. Good afternoon. So as Carl has said, I'll present very high level on those 7 value chains, and I'll do that very quickly. You'll forgive me if I chant numbers, but we are here to talk about those numbers. So let's go to the first slide. So, Your Excellency, on 19th of October 2022, we sat in this same room and you challenged us to move from contribution, 7.8 contribution to GDP to 20%. To 20%. And that is what these value chains will do. And the wisdom of selecting those value chains, and of course they are much more than that, will be able to, okay. Thank you, June. So we'll be able to move that contribution to 20%, as you said, 20 by 30. But what does that mean? That means that you're talking about 5 million jobs. We're talking about contribution, not only 1 trillion today, but 5 trillion. Let's go to the next slide. So these are the value chains that you're going to talk about in that order, starting with cotton. Next, please. Next. So a market of 300 million people. This is what we consider as our domestic market. The 5 countries in East Africa. These are the number of textile companies that we have in Kenya. But if you look at on the lower end, 85 billion worth of imports of apparel, of garments is what you're doing. 19 billion is what you call mitumba. Now, people say that every bale of mitumba you import, half of it is unused, so perhaps you could be losing 9 billion out of that. Okay, let's go to the next one. What is the aspiration? So how we have organized this presentation, number 1 is a status, lay of the land. Number 2 is the aspiration, what is the art of possible? And number 3 will be the interventions that we require. If you look at that, this is only local textile industry. 200,000 new jobs in the factories. We have not even talked about the farmers. 40 billion savings in the imports that we're making today. That billion of those local value chains you're talking about could be realized by backward integration, or what people call vertical integration. If you go to the next one, that is the apparel export. Today, we are exporting apparels worth $550 million US. That is what the export would look like. But we have to make sure that, and we go to the next slide, we have to make sure that new facilities are available. And allow me, because I have only 10 minutes to go through this presentation. So what do we need to do? We need to fix Naivasha. We need to fix Dongo Kundu as soon as possible. We need also, because one of the areas that has a problem is the textile mills. 40% of the cost is power. We need to give them a special rate of about 5 cents US per kilowatt hour, and they'll be able to mop up the cotton. Revived cotton ginneries, I think they are 8 in number across the country. So Kikomi is there. Some of them may not be functional now, but this is what will unlock this sector. Let's go to the next one. Leather. We, as Kenya, have the 3rd largest herd of livestock in Africa. But if you look at what we are doing with our leather, and Mr. President, you have sat in a meeting and you know the numbers more than many people, is that 3 million hides collected, half are lost, eaten by dogs, others smuggled, half processed, 70% of that exported, but we need to do local value addition. This sector can actually transform this country. Majority of the people who play in this sector are actually SMEs. Every county represented here, they have livestock, and this can be replicated across the country. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the aspirations? Can we process the 90% of the hides and skins that we produce? Can we produce 15 million shoes for every year for our children who are going to school? If, and Rao is here, he will tell you that a cow has 30 square feet of hide, an average cow. If you slaughter that cow, you sell about 50,000, 60,000 shillings. If you make shoes from that 30 square feet, you make 20 shoes, is almost 100,000. So, Mr. President, we can encourage Kenyans to slaughter cows for hide, not for meat. And it is possible to do that. We can move the contribution today, 15 billion to 75 billion. And that is just scratching the surface. 100,000 jobs can be made, and these are actually people across the country, because people are wearing shoes all over the country. Let's go to the interventions. What do we need to do? And there's a lot of high-level detail work behind this. This is just very high level. Kenani, I think this has been a story for a long time. We need to fix this. I think 90% of the work has been done, so it's just to finish the 10%. Karioko Common User Facility. Many people may not know that government has invested in a common user facility in Karioko that can make 75,000 shoes a month. It has remained unused because county, KLDC, we need to fix that. It is a state of art. We can make the shoes that we have here from Karioko. Mr. President, when we met before, you said you can invest in 10 others across the country or 47 others across the country. This is what is going to unlock this sector. And then, of course, improve the quality of hides and skins. Let's go to the other value chain. Pyrethrum. My governor, Her Excellency Susan, is here, and you'll be interested in these numbers. We used to supply 90% of pyrethrum globally. Today, we are merely at 2%. But when we have started this conversation, these numbers have started stacking up. Because now from 819 million, that is 77.4% growth year on year between 2021 and 2022. So putting the efforts together, that 77% can grow even to triple. Look at the other number, 6 growth, 100% growth in export value from 51 billion to 360. This value chain, we used to do this 40 years ago. We used to do this 30 years ago. Why can't we do it now? Let's go to the next slide. So what is the aspiration? What is the art of the possible? We can build this from today, 900 tons MT to 10,000. But look at the numbers, how we are going to move the numbers. Billions to the farmers. Look at the number of households that we can impact. The revenue in billions in terms of export, looking at that growth of sixfold and driving it. And this is not the no-brainer. We can do it. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what do we need to do? Just giving farmers access to the seedlings. Let's just give farmers access to the seedlings. Today, even if I wanted to help where I went to school in Timboroa, slopes of Timboroa, there are no seedlings. So we need just like what Your Excellency have done with BT cotton, we need to do the same on pyrethrum. Let's go to the next one. Farmer. And farmer is very, very interesting. As you can see, that is only our local market in billions, 273, that is what's addressable market. 70% of the drugs that you consume here are imported. 60% of those drugs are generic drugs, meaning we can make them right here in Kenyan soil. We need to go and knock doors of the people who make those drugs, encourage the people who are making those drugs here today to make more of this. We have not even touched Africa. We have unique tropical diseases within this side of global south, and perhaps this could be the hub of that innovation. Let's go to the next slide. So what is possible? If we only touch 5% of African market, which is 1.8 trillion, what's called the total market. If you only look at that as addressable market is only 5%, which is very low ambition, we can go to 88 billion. These numbers are possible, and these numbers, we have cracked them with the sector and saying, if you're granted what you want, what would you do? Let's go to the second value chain. So what do we need to do? We need to give incentives to the local manufacturers of pharma. Because today we are competing with a global, because these are big and heavy investment. They cannot be able to compete with the global manufacturers. Either we bring the global manufacturers here, but as we do that, we give incentives. Let's go to the next value chain. Edible oils. You've been very vocal about this, Your Excellency. The import of what you call CPO, crude palm oil, is $1 billion US every year. That's what we have, 1 or 2, perhaps even more than that. We have these companies, 13 local processing companies, fairly doing very well, 100,000 jobs in the value chain, including packaging and all that. This is one of, when you do backward integration, is what you can stop reducing or start reducing the import bill on this value chain. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So what do we need to do? Is it possible to start moving palm oil to other oil or to other oil seeds? Is it possible planting our own palm oil? Studies have been done. The Lower Tana and the whole of Western Belt and Lake Basin, we can be able to do edible, palm oil or palm. Across the fence on the side of Uganda, they have done about 60,000 acres done by Kenyan investors. So we met with Her Excellency Gladys Wanga and say, give us 100,000 acres. And we start thinking about how to do that. And our members are ready to do that. This is possible. But we cannot, again, expect the same companies to buy the land. We need to think about how do we facilitate them to get that land. Let's go to the next one. So I've already talked about the solutions, and these are just some of them, but there's a huge potential here. Okay? Let's go to the next one. Housing, I don't think, Your Excellency, we need to talk about this housing because you know more than us about this one. Yeah, and I can see P.S. Hinga is here. So this one, we're going to fly over it. I think what we are seeing, the picture is even smaller than your picture that you have. So allow me, Your Excellency, not to talk about housing because I know P.S. Hinga, I could be in the panel and we'll talk about that. Let's go to the last one. I think the last one is automotive. And this is an interesting value chain. In 2008, former President Mwai Kibaki, God rest his soul, his government just tweaked one item in the policy, remove the import duty of 250 cc's and below, and just because of that one line, the explosion that we see of motorcycles and the amount of jobs that motorcycles have created. Motorcycles today, there are 3 million boda-bodas operating in Kenya today. But we can go further than that. What if we now decide we are going to assemble those motorcycles here? What if we do and say we are going to CKD, complete knockdown kits here? Again, you will have proliferation of manufacturing, small-scale manufacturing facilities across the country because motorcycles are across the country. This, Your Excellency, also is something that can be done. There are people, we've already started manufacturing here wire harnessing, which is now being done here. There are parts that we are going to do, and also for the new vehicles. If you go to AVA in Mombasa, they are doing complete knockdown kit of Hilux trucks. They've started doing the ones for even Marco Polo bus, which is a luxury bus. So there's a lot that we can do on this value chain. Okay, next. And I think this, we don't even need to overthink about this. It has been done. We just need to replicate what has been done elsewhere. And I think, Your Excellency, this was the last value chain. And mine was just to show the numbers. We have detailed work that we have done on this. This presentation is on behalf of all the private sectors. We have collaborated with the MITI, Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. They are fully involved in this. We want to thank you. And just to leave everyone with one thought. We always think big. We always talk big. As we think big, let us, Your Excellency, start small, but start now. It is possible and we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Your Excellency, you've had the details of only those 7. Since we're celebrating 60 years since we had our independence, only about 7 value chains have grown this economy. In agriculture alone, we can have about 30 more. Then bring IT, and we will have much more. Then bring automotive, as has been said. But I want us to have this conversation. So, Your Excellency, Mr. President, Dr. William Ruto, allow me to invite you into this panel, to join us in this panel. And allow me to invite the Chair of COG, Her Excellency Anne Waiguru, and our moderator for today, Eric Latif, will join us and ask a few questions. And as we brief to Your Excellency, the way we want to conduct this panel today, apart from Eric Latif, who will ask us some hard questions, some of the responses we will give between ourselves with the COG is from our members here. So I know the Chair of COG will be calling some of the governors to respond, and I'll also be calling some of the industry leaders in those value chains to give some interventions as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, President, thank you for joining us this afternoon and for